Here's something else you need to know that's part of the trifecta of bullying. Remember we talked about location, we talked about the victim, we talked about the bully. There's a fourth piece, there's a fourth dimension to bullying that you need to understand. This is one of the most important part. In the activity of bullying, the bystander plays a very, very important role, because from the bystander, it actually encourages, according to research done by Snell. Let's read what he says. He says in 2002 he found out that in most instances, though, bystanders are much more likely to provide encouragement and support to the bully than they are to actively intercede to help the victim. Now, how do you do that? By you standing and doing nothing as a bystander, you are affirming the bullying and you are encouraging the bullying. How many of you watched the last episode of Seinfeld? How many of you remember that scene where they did nothing? How many of you know what I'm talking about? Good. It's called the Good Samaritan Law. How many of you know about the Good Samaritan Law? Yes. This is what I'm talking about. Your bystanders, we should have a Good Samaritan Law in our schools as well, not just extended after you turn 18, we out in the public. We need to practice this. We need to train our bystanders to say no. We need to train our bystanders to not contribute by doing nothing about it. Remember, your bystanders also need to be trained. So we're looking at training your entire school in preventing bullying. This is a very important part when you will see in my plan. Teachers are often surprised when they see some great kid in the class that they had, thought they were wonderful, and they go out in the playground and see that child bullying another child. So a teacher needs to look at children in different contexts, different environments, follow them, see how they interact in the lunchroom, at recess, on the bus. Okay? You might have a whole different perception in the class about what they do outside. You need to check on them. Okay? Something else, schools are supposed to be well-supervised settings, so how could widespread bullying, how can we allow this thing to happen? Guess what, folks? It's a covert activity. Bullying is a covert activity. Adults seldom see it. That's why we don't notice it a whole lot. It's really, really covert. Okay? It's internal. It's inflicting emotional stress to the human being all the time. You don't see emotional stress a whole lot. Okay? There are other reasons why bullying can go unchallenged in school as well. Let's take a look at those. Very important. Your school staff may misinterpret aggressive bullying. Some will say, it's just horseplay. Don't worry about it. They're just kids. How many of you heard that before? Okay. When questioned by adults and victims, they denied that bullying is taking place. We had a denial question come in. That just goes back to the point I've been making, that victims may lie also about the bully being present. So never ever ask the person being bullied in front of the person that's doing the bullying, did this person bully you? That's a dumb question. We shouldn't be asking it there, because they're going to say no, obviously, because they're going to be fearful. They're still anxious because this person is, the fence around the school, it's just in the school, everything outside that fence, they're terrified. So be careful on that. There may be too few supervising adults in unstructured settings. One of the other things that causes bullying to happen more is that we don't have people in the right location. Remember we talked about location? How many of us know of someone who's doing supervising duty? As teachers, we got to wear all different caps and we got to go out there, watch this different areas. How many of you actually supervise under a stairwell? Probably not. Because we know under that stairwell, 90% of our bullying takes place there by the person doing the bullying. Why don't we put someone strategic at that location to prevent that? Something very, very simple. So actually what I suggest you do is that you create a bullying map. Yes, a bullying map of your school. And you put an X where most of your incidents are happening. Because the first thing you need to ask from a student who's being bullied, where did this happen? And then you start to collect the data and you make a case for where you need to. And if principals are tuned in today, this is something very important that you need to do in having these areas supervised very, very closely, and that's part of my plan, which I'll go into. So what can schools do? Okay, the next 3 or 4 slides, I'm going to let you read that on your own. It talks about some guidelines and how to go ahead and start assessing, how to do surveys, how to find multiple methods to collect information, how to do student focus group meetings, how to involve your parents. So you can read up more about that. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go straight to Dr. Khan's bully prevention plan. Yes, I just can't wait to share this with you because I know there are lots of oxes out there. Yes, ox, if you're listening right now, this is for you. The first thing you need to do is that you need to treat this as at a systems level. At a system level. This is not a small piece. I'm just dealing with this. Your entire school system, your county school system must have a plan, a master plan. Part of your master plan will come from your school board and your school board policies manual. And in there, under your discipline plan, you should have a very, very descriptive action plan on how you're going to aggressively treat bullying. And my advice is to have a zero tolerance, read my lips, zero tolerance to bullying, okay? Because it is serious, folks. We need to take serious action and meet this thing head on. We need to enlist the support of all staff members, as you can see from the diagram I've just showed you. We need to collect data. We need to find the best practices, and the good news is I have the best practices, and I'm going to show you those best practices in a few moments, and we need to do this from a positive stance. And what this whole concept of my plan will show you is, very simply put, it is all very positive and it's preventative. We're putting prevention in place. We are not waiting for children to fail. We are not waiting for children to bully. We're going to stop it before even it starts or attempts to start. It stops right here. No child should experience this. No child should experience this. Let's talk about the plan. My plan looks like a triangle. It involves 3 levels. 1, primary prevention measures. The entire school gets it. Secondary prevention measures. And it's broken up where you can see 80, 15, and 80% of the students, 15% of the students, and 5% of the students. Let's go to the next one. The secondary prevention, we're going to talk about a strategy I call check in, connect, check out. And lastly, we're going to put into place in our systems bully prevention plan what I call tertiary prevention measures. These tertiary prevention measures are specialized intervention systems that we're going to put into place for students who continue with high-risk bullying behavior. And notice these are going to be a 5% of the 7% that consistently and continuously bully. And these are the ones at the tertiary level who are violent, physically aggressive, literally hit, punch, maim, kick, hurt others, physical abuse. Those students would get the tertiary prevention, okay? So we got 3 levels. What are they? Nicole?
Primary.
Brittany? What's the second one?
Secondary.
Secondary. And Antoinette?
Tertiary.
Tertiary, thank you. Each one serving a different purpose. As you go up, it gets more and more intense in service delivery of interventions. Okay? Now let's take a break on some questions. Does anybody have any questions right now about what I'm talking about? Because you have to understand the concept. Number 1, a review. It needs to be systematic. Whole school needs to buy into it. The system must have some sort of action plan in the school board policies and also locally at the school. And we need to adopt this triangle: primary, secondary, and tertiary. So the question you might want to ask me is, so what does a primary prevention method look like? What does a secondary look like? What does a tertiary look like? And I have a plan in place telling you exactly what you need to do. And again, by no means is this a recipe that you need to stick to. Please feel free to add any of the existing things that you're doing. I do know that lots of you out there listening in and who are in schools are doing wonderful things, but maybe some of these concepts and ideas you could infuse, and you can create this into a solid plan and a strategic plan that's going to reduce the amount of bullying that takes place. So let's go ahead and take some more questions about anything we've covered so far. If you have that question, East, West, and Middle Tennessee, feel free to call in your questions on anything we've talked about or any question that you might have. Feel free to do that right now. If we have any questions from our audience members listening in today, we would take some questions. Yes? Yes? Mm-hmm.
The restrooms in many public schools are an area for bullying to the extent that in middle school, for example, sometimes children just don't use them anymore. What is your, obviously teachers can't be monitoring inside the restrooms. What is your suggestion?
Well, if that is a location that's identified as an area where we have a pattern of bullying behavior, I would suggest having a male or a female supervisor, could be a teacher assistant, assigned to that particular area during the time that this happens the most. It probably happens just during transition time from class to class most of the time, or it could happen during the lunchtime most of the time. So we just need to find those patterns, decode the time, and place a male or a female. And that does happen sometimes. And sometimes walking your class to the bathroom, and sometimes even doing pre-correcting and letting students know that this is what's acceptable before we get there, and modeling, simulating, and getting them to think about it. But we can't place people at these strategic locations only if the problem exists at these locations, and we need to help ascertain that through collecting data. That's why data is so important. You saw that other circle that I put in there. Yes,